Yeah, that was fine.
Hey, Kimon, how are you doing?
Hello, good afternoon. If you would please mute yourself. We're actually going to get started in just a few minutes. We were waiting. We had over 130 people registered, so it might take a few minutes to get everybody into the room here. So just be patient with us. Thank you. If you're just joining, if you could go ahead and mute yourself. We're going to get started here in just a few minutes. We're just letting everyone in. While we are doing that, I just want to thank everyone for being here today. Welcome you to the Black Developers Capital Initiative panel. We are waiting for folks to join, so if you could just hang tight with us, please mute your microphone. In the meantime, if you want to go ahead in your chat function, say hello. Where are you from? Maybe what you're excited to learn. If you already have burning questions, we are going to have a Q&A at the very end, and we'll be taking those via chat. So, you know, feel free to jump on the chat and start getting engaged now. Nina, if you could give me the okay when you think we have a good critical mass of folks.
We have 90 attending so far, so I think we can get started.
Okay, well, that is so exciting. And just so that you all are aware, we are recording this so that we can share it on our website at a later time. So welcome again. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you to our panelists. My name is Millie Hurt, and I am actually Vice President of Affordable Housing Lending at the Ohio Capital Corporation for Housing, but I'm also very proud to be the Vice President of the Women's Affordable Housing Network, our national umbrella, and the President of the Ohio Women's Affordable Housing Network. So that's a lot, but I am here to welcome all of you and tell you a little bit about WAHN. So again, we thank you for joining today's panel discussion about the Black Developers Capital Initiative. And we're so grateful for our panelists for taking time on this final day of Black History Month to share the story of how this $75 million fund came to be. WAHN is deeply committed to equity for all in our industry and beyond. So this was definitely something that we wanted to share with our members. We know that within the affordable housing industry, we have our share of inequalities and underrepresentations, but we also have some of the most passionate, intelligent, driven people that you can imagine. So we know when we come together, we can really make amazing things happen. And I think today's panel is truly a testament to just that. Before I introduce the panelists, I'd be remiss and I'm trying to run both things here, I apologize. I would be remiss if I didn't thank our sponsors, which you can see now on your screen. Without their generous support, we obviously could not pull off, you know, putting together a growing national organization. So again, we thank them for their support. I'd also like to thank our board of directors, as you see up on the screen. And I think all, if not most, are here today. So if they want to wave and say hello, they work tirelessly to pull off our mission of creating chapters in every state. And that's something that we're really proud to announce, is that we're hoping to launch 10 new chapters, estimated, I should say 10 new chapters this year in 2022 to expand on the already 4 state chapters that we currently have, which is Atlanta, Indiana, Ohio, and North Carolina. So if any of you are on,
I got invited to it, so I don't know.
If you could just mute, sorry. If you are on and you work in those states, go and check out the existing states and become a member. So we all, at WAHN, our vision really is the empowerment of women and equity in the workplace for all. And we're working hard on a national network initiative, which stands for National Equity Together Takes Work. We all know that change does not happen. We have to work for it. So more to come on this in the spring, but just wanted to a quick preview on that. We continue to work on our policy updates, and we're hoping with Emily's leadership, which I should have mentioned, thanks to our executive committee, we're hoping to have our next policy update in April. Lastly, we are ramping up attendance at many of the upcoming conferences this year, so we hope to see you all there. And before I announce our entire panel, I'd like to especially thank Lori Little, who's on our Ohio board and who helped bring this entire panel together today. We know that's quite a lift, and she's just been a treasure and brings so much passion to the industry. When she first described this initiative, I absolutely brought goosebumps my entire body. So I just want to say thank you to her especially. And so with that, I would like to quickly introduce our panel so that we have as much time as possible for the discussion. We have Susan Green, who's Senior Vice President of Bank of America, LaToya Kyle, Market Director for Low Income Investment Fund, Anna McNeil with the Urban Investment Group of Goldman Sachs. Raven Thompson is with the Development Manager at the Benoit Group. Carolyn Smith, VP of Strategic Communications for the Low Income Investment Fund, and Lori Little, President and CEO of the National Affordable Housing Trust. I'm going to kick it over to Carolyn Smith, who is our moderator for today. And again, I just want to say thank you for everyone's time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Millie, for that introduction. Let's hop right into some of the questions that we have for our various panelists. First, LaToya Kyle, Beller-Liffer, Southeast Market Director. LaToya, can you give us some background on your career in affordable housing finance and how it brought you to LIFT and also the creation of BDCI?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. As Carolyn mentioned, I'm LaToya Kyle, based here in Atlanta, leading our Southeast office for Low Income Investment Fund. And for those of you who may not know about LIFT, we are national CDFI, so we lend to developers for the development of housing, affordable housing, most of which is pre-development capital and acquisitions. We do some construction lending, but most of it being early stage capital. I've been in the affordable housing for 5 years, and excitingly, the first transaction that I closed at this at my organization was due to attending a luncheon for the women in affordable housing in Atlanta. So, great networking opportunities. As I mentioned, I've been here for 5 years, and our organization began having conversations prior to 2020 about social justice and racial equity and what that meant for our organization, what it meant for the communities that we serve, how we wanted to make an impact in that area. And as we all know, that in 2020, there was kind of a new realization about what equity meant in our society.
LaToya, can everyone just mute really quickly? Sorry about that, LaToya.
No worries. So we were already having these conversations about race and equity, and with the what we were seeing in the unrest in our society, we began to have even deeper level conversations about our organization. And we began to review our clients. We talked about what in our business not Black developers that were currently in our client base, and recognizing that since our direct end user capital are the developers, knowing that that is a form of wealth creation, not only for the developer, but for many of the parties that they impact, whether it's their architects or their consultants, that it's a byproduct of what we are able to provide to them. But we're not servicing developers, Black developers beginning, they're unable to create wealth in their businesses. So we began to look at our policy we had some implemented some underwriting criteria that did not allow. In doing so, not only could they not access.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt. I really am, but you're actually fading in and out, and I can hear maybe every other word or every other sentence. I don't know if anyone else is experiencing the same thing.
Yeah. So Latoya, how about for a second, because you're fading in and out, you're breaking up a bit. And I know before the call, it was like working perfectly fine. But let's hop over to a question for Susan while we work on your audio. Is that fair? Okay. So
I'll try to find a location closer to the window. Okay.
Okay. So Susan, tell us a little bit about how you got into community development finance, and we're curious, especially why did Bank of America decide to fund Lyft's new capital product, which I know it was a little bit harder to hear, but essentially within BDCI, it's an initiative that has two different capital products, one supported by NHT and Goldman Sachs, and one that's Lyft's line of credit and is more pre-development early stage capital that's funded by Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and Mackenzie Scott, and a couple of other folks that just escaped my mind for a second. So I know that's terrible, but apologies for that. But Susan, can you hop in and give us a little bit of your background and why it was important for B of A to participate in this?
Sure, happy to. Good morning, and I'm still in San Francisco. So good morning to those of you on the West Coast, and good afternoon to those of you further east. Again, I'm Susan Green. I'm with Bank of America, CDFI Lending and Investing. We're part of the Environment, Social, and Governance group for the bank, trying to direct capital and resources to low-income and underserved communities nationwide. And there were several reasons why we were anxious to be a part of this initiative that Lyft was developing. We provided $10 million in 10-year below market capital to Lyft for their line of credit product. And there were several reasons why we were so eager to be a part of this. First, CDFI is a certification that groups like Lyft get from the US Treasury Department. And what it means is that the organization provides loans, but more importantly, commits to providing at least 60% of those loans to low income or under-resourced communities. In fact, industry-wide, 84% of CDFI borrowers are low income, 60% are people of color, 50% are women, and nearly a third are located in rural communities. The thing that CDFIs bring is that they are not regulated like banks. So they have a lot more flexibility in how they underwrite loans and how they can structure capital to make sure it works for their borrowers. Because of this, nationwide, we actually have $2 billion invested in CDFIs like Lyft. And for these reasons, we were really excited to be part of this conversation with Lyft. Through their line of credit product, Lyft is offering capital at an earlier stage to developers. Typically, banks come in, once construction has begun. So you already have the permits, you already have the plans, you've already done a lot of pre-development work, but who's going to pay for that? So through this line of credit, Lyft can get into projects at an earlier stage than what conventional banks can. And they can go in for a longer term. As when we come into finance construction, we're in and out in 1 to 2 years, but Lyft can go 5 years through this product to really help projects kind of get off the ground and also help the developers build their own capacity. Lyft can offer more flexible underwriting standards, like lower equity requirements, and they can also price the capital at more flexible rates than what banks can. That's the magic of a CDFI like Lyft, is that they can bring private sector capital from Bank of America with foundation support to provide capital that's flexible and more accessible than what capital from the conventional markets is. I think a second key driver for us in wanting to support this initiative is from a racial equity perspective. As Millie mentioned, this is the last day of Black History Month, and I think it's important to ground in the realities that we still see nationwide, where white households have 10 times the wealth of of Black-led households and 8 times the wealth of Hispanic Latino households. I mean, these are disparities that have persisted for decades. You know, we all saw how COVID disproportionately impacted communities of color with higher sickness rates, higher death rates, higher unemployment rates, just shocking disparities that called for action. We, in 2020, in response, we launched a $1 billion racial equity commitment, which then we increased to $1.25 billion in early 2021. And so we're trying to do new things with these funds, recognizing that the tried and true isn't working and in many respects is causing some of the problems that we're seeing. So some examples of the new, we are investing $350 million in BIPOC-led private equity firms that are investing equity in BIPOC-led small businesses. We are also investing equity in minority deposit institutions. These are Black and Brown-led banks that serve their communities and have boots on the ground in minority communities. We're investing equity so that they can grow and respond to the needs of their communities. Now, this initiative that LIFT proposed to us squarely fits within this broader racial equity commitment that we have. And then it also hit on the third priority that I wanted to touch on, the affordable housing gap. I mean, it's been a gap that has existed for far too long and continues to persist in too many communities. You know, in so many communities, low-income renters pay more than 50% of their income towards rent. And that's hard to live when more than half your money every month is going to your landlord. We've also seen that there are, in 70% of all counties nationwide, if you have a full-time job with minimum wage, you still cannot afford a 2-bedroom apartment in 70% of the counties across the country. So there's a dire need for more affordable housing. Bank of America has tripled our homeownership commitment in the last couple of years to provide more flexible down payment mortgages, down payment closing cost grants. We've done, you know, over $6.5 billion of tax credit financing and construction financing to build affordable housing, rental housing. But again, we need to get the projects off the ground and to build the capacity of the developers. So when LIFT came to us and proposed to offer more flexible terms than what we can do directly to help drive kind of the racial equity initiative that we're trying to support, and then to help build more affordable housing, we wanted to do whatever we could to help make LIFT and these projects successful. So thanks for inviting us to be part of this conversation. And I'm looking forward to hearing, you know, what others have to say and some questions, because what we're all trying to do here is of critical importance, and it takes a lot of people at the table to find the best path forward. Thank you.
That was great, Susan. LaToya, I see you've signed back in, so would love to get a little bit of background before we hop over to Raven and the rest of our questions, just about BDCI, the origin and creation of this initiative from LIFT and HT.
Sure. So I'm literally sitting at the window of this hotel, so hopefully this works.
It's working so much better.
Just up and down, okay, as I'm talking. And so hopefully that you all heard kind of what we were doing to lead up to the decision to create BDCI. But what I'll tell you is it came from staff input as well as our clients and prospect engagement. And what we learned, and probably what we knew, is that access to capital is challenging, and that early access is greatly challenging for these projects, especially if those individuals or those organizations are new or fairly new or have not built up a balance sheet that could support traditional underwriting standards. So what we did is we decided to evaluate what we were using as criteria to analyze these new loans, recognizing that many times we have had nominal losses in our over 30-year term as an organization. And most of the deals that we are going to be supporting are live tech deals that traditionally are closed. It's just a matter of time. And so we created a program that had several features. One, we wanted it to be long-term. We recognize that it takes time for these projects to get built and then also to be able to generate income for the organizations. We wanted it to be a revolver, in that if they are able to close one transaction, they're able to then again do multiple transactions with it. We wanted it to be low cost, so that was where our partnership with Bank of America came in. And we wanted to change the underwriting standard. We could no longer rely on traditional metrics as far as financial capacity of the organization and history of those companies. And so we made it an experience-based product. We will review the financials of either the company or the borrower, the owner of the company rather, but it is as a benchmark to assess the growth of the company later. We hone in on the experience level of the developers. Have they done what they are proposing to do? Did they do it on time, within budget? And it does not even, their experience does not even have to be just with their own company. We have a client that has been a consultant for many years for others, and she was able to provide us information and details that she's able to do this work. And so she wants to launch from a consultant role into her own development space. That's been one of our first for clients because she has experience. And so we launched with $20 million, and you'll hear about the additional 50 when we talk to NHT, but our program was $20 million. We have at this point allocated all of the funds, and one of those organizations that you'll hear from later about how they were able to use it. So that's BDCI in general. Oh, one other feature of it, we also understand that many of these organizations are smaller as far as their team, and so we did reserve 10% of each funding can be used for operations, not just the project, but if they need to hire a consultant, if they need to hire additional staff, that's a component of the line of credit as well.
That's really great background from Susan and LaToya. So knowing how the product was developed and how it's working on our side, Raven from Benoit Group, can you share how Benoit Group is one of the recipients of the line of credit from LIF? Do you mind sharing with us how it's supporting Benoit Group and what the impact of the line of credit has been on y'all's business?
Sure. And guys, please excuse some of the noise in the background. I'm not able to drown it out. But yes, I am Raven Thompson, and I currently work with the Benoit Group as their development manager. And basically that just entails managing the project from the design, idea, and conception all the way to construction closing, to where we hand it off to our compliance team once the project is placed in service. And a little bit about my background is I started out as a property manager for an affordable housing developer. I did that roughly for about 2 years, and then I moved over to the state agency side and in Mississippi as well as Georgia DCA. And there, again, we are the stewards of the tax credits, where we actually take the developers at that particular time through a, sorry, someone is getting a smoothie done. But trying to drown out some of that noise in the background. So, of course, working at the state agency, I worked on the cost certification process as well as the feasibility and underwriting team for the housing development department there at Georgia DCA as well as Mississippi. And so, fast forward to working with Benoit and to LaToya's BDCI and LIF product. Basically, what that product did for us as a developer, it helped us to update most of our third parties that may have gotten outside of the 6-month timeline for submission with the tax credit application. So we were able to go back in and re-update those third parties, as well as get to 100% drawings with our design team so that we could submit our projects for permitting, as well as submit our full tax credit applications to the state agency.
Thanks so much, Raven. That was great background on how that product is really impacting Benoit Group's line of business at this moment. Want to pivot over to Lori and the NHT side of this initiative. So in October 2020, LIF, NHT, and SAFE entered a joint venture to tackle the pressing affordable housing crisis. And one of the goals of this partnership was to create innovative capital products that could shift real change in our market. Lori, can you share why NHT decided to join LIF on this initiative and create the LIHTC Fund?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks, everybody, today. I am really excited about getting to share with you kind of this project, this initiative, this Black Developer Capital Initiative that just is a mouthful, so we call BDCI. NAHT is a three decade plus nonprofit tax credit syndicator, and I head that group. As we have grown and really worked to think about what is our niche in this industry and what's really important, in 2020, we determined that we needed to have a capital partner that was really focused on lending and focused on communities. And so in October of 2020, NAHT became a joint venture of two organizations, LIF, the Low Income Investment Fund, and a group called Stewards of Affordable Housing for the Future, SAFE, which is a collaborative of 12 national nonprofit developers. And as we looked at the why behind that joint venture, one of the things that LIF was in front exploring was really how do we change the capital initiative, particularly around, as you heard Latoya and Raven talk about, balance sheet, and focus more around experience. And SAFE at the same time, while its members did not have a balance sheet, they realized that they had been blessed and been fortunate from decades of support and start. So they had experience, but they had a strong balance sheet. So SAFE has been working on a racial equity pledge that really focuses those organizations on thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. And so it just seemed natural that we sit and think at this very important time, how can NAHT participate in a really meaningful way? And we looked to one of our longstanding partners, Goldman Sachs. We have done numerous deals with Goldman Sachs. They were, and you'll hear from Anna in just a moment, they were on their own review of internal processes and thinking about how they at this time can really help support and wealth build Black-owned and Black-led organizations. And so we came together and said, we want to be a companion piece to this enterprise loan effort and support those projects being led by those organizations receiving that enterprise capital. So I'm excited to share that we have a $75 million fund with Goldman Sachs as the investor, and we're working together to find projects from Black-owned and Black-led developers. We've closed on our first project. We've got another that will be closing very shortly in Washington, D.C., and we have 4 others in the commitment process. I had the really good fortune of talking to many of these are women, such as Raven, who have shared their journey. I will tell you one of the things that to me is most impactful about NHT participating in this is being able to walk on a project where a larger number of the population are Black or other persons of colors, and walking with the person in charge of making this project happen, being particularly a woman of color that is very inspirational to those people at the project, and just sharing that, you know, hey, we're all in this together, and the person that is making this happen is the person we're supporting. And in this project, it's frequently a Black woman such as Raven, who's making it happen at the project level and really inspiring not only us, but also the people at the project. The other thing I would share, Carolyn, is we found that while we talk about experience and we talk about how that really is important, we still had a little struggle with credit committees. And credit committees have a life of their own. And we started talking about changing the vernacular from the risk of a lighter balance sheet to the perceived risk of balance sheet. But both LIF and NAHT were fortunate to get an unfunded guarantee, which means we didn't have to take it down from their balance sheet, but using the balance sheet of Arnold Venture Foundation, a group supportive out of Houston, Texas, provided a very significant grant. Unfunded guarantee is what we call it. They've committed, if there's any hiccups, if there is any risk, to the investors to make certain that risk is covered. I will tell you from working on these projects, Carolyn, there's not going to be any hiccups. We're going to be at the end of 10 years and we're never have drawn down on that guarantee. But I would be remiss if I didn't talk about how important that was to this initiative as well.
Yeah, no, and I think that's completely fair and a really important piece of it too. Seeing as though there's clearly a renewed commitment across the sector and with new investors and funders that are really interested in helping push this through. But this is a good time to bring in Anna into the conversation. And if you could just share, why did Goldman find NHT's YTech Fund to be the right investment for its 1 Million Black Women Initiative?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Carolyn and Lori, for the lead in, and thanks to all the other panelists and everyone in attendance. Absolutely be happy to speak to that. So for a little background, I'm on the acquisitions team of the Urban Investment Group, which sits within the Goldman Sachs Asset Management Division. And we've really spent the last 20 years investing in innovative mixed use, mixed income projects across the country. And our acquisitions team last year actually deployed over $2.5 billion. And we've worked predominantly in affordable housing transactions, including several projects with minority developers and in majority minority communities. So last year, about 42% of our investing, or $1.2 billion, was with minority-led sponsors, which we're really excited about. And as Lori mentioned, we worked really closely together to establish the $75 million affordable housing fund alongside NAHT. And we worked with NAHT previously across 7 different projects. So we were really excited to collaborate again. And we were thrilled, like Lori said, to learn that NAHT had been working on its own Black developer capital initiatives and thought this was really the perfect opportunity for partnership again. And I'm also happy to speak a little bit to the 1 Million Black Women Initiative that you mentioned, which is the firm's commitment to advancing racial equity. So we announced this last year, and it's a $10 billion commitment over 10 years to narrow opportunity gaps for 1 million Black women nationwide across 6 key pillars. So those are housing, access to capital, healthcare, education, workforce and wages, and digital connectivity. So we're approaching this initiative from several angles across the whole firm, but within UIG, Urban Investment Group, we're really focused on providing capital to Black-led businesses and firms and continuing to invest in the creation and preservation of affordable housing in majority minority communities as well. So as Lori mentioned, we decided to establish this fund between Goldman and NAHT to finance underlying affordable housing projects, all of which are going to be developed by Black-led sponsors. And as Lori mentioned, the $75 million fund, so it's a pretty significant capital commitment to this initiative. We were also really intentional in our decision to ensure that a majority of the fund's capital would be used to finance projects with Black women-led sponsors, and particularly because this really aligned with the thesis of 1 Million Black Women, which is seeking to address those dual disproportionate, gender and racial biases that Black women have faced for generations. As the other panelists mentioned, Black women are just vastly underrepresented in the real estate industry and especially in executive roles. So this is just, one example of the immense challenges that Black women face, despite being foundational to their families, their communities, the U.S. economy. So through 1 Million Black Women, we're really focused on reaching Black women at key moments in their lives from early childhood through retirement. We're pleased to say that, as Lori mentioned, the projects we're investing in through this fund are impactful for several reasons. We're providing Black women and their families with high quality affordable housing, often at service enriched properties with on-site programming for families. And we're supporting Black women-led development firms by providing them with access to institutional capital, which can be particularly catalytic for the smaller firms as they work to build capacity, as we've discussed. We're aiming to address also, wealth disparities like Susan touched on with this fund. We think it's important, as Lori said, that sponsorship teams really better reflect the communities in which they're working. This will contribute to more equitable development outcomes, especially in these majority minority communities in need of affordable housing. And we found it was really crucial to have a focused and mission-aligned partner like NAHT for this initiative, especially as we're attempting to tackle these problems at a larger scale. Partnering with NAHT NHT, we're able to source a robust pipeline of impactful deals, deploying more capital and deploying it more efficiently. And the structure that we worked out with NHT allows Goldman to build relationships with these developers directly, which is beneficial for both of us because these smaller developers are gaining valuable experience working with a larger institutional investor. And we continue to better understand the needs of Black developers and how we can, better support them with initiatives like 1 Million Black Women.
That's really great. So as we're coming up on time, we've heard some amazing work that's been happening with this partnership between NHT and LIF. I think the main pressing question on everyone's mind is what's next, Lori and Latoya? What can we sort of expect as the next iteration? Or are there any ideas or plans that you all can share with us? Latoya, I know since you kind of just came back on, I'd love for you to kick it off if you have anything to share.
Sure. So our goal at LIFT would be, one, to continue to expand the program. We recognize $20 million seems like a lot, but it goes really quickly, and we have been inundated from potential borrowers for this type of capital. Then we would like to see an industry, and we know that we're a small piece, but we could be a catalyst for change so that other groups, underserved groups in this space can be served, and it doesn't have to be restricted to just this program. But we think that industry-based risk assessment model could be adapted to a lot of different platforms. That is one area. We've heard concerns and questions, from other underrepresented populations, whether that's women or other people of color. How do we expand this? So we are looking at a variety of different options and other partnerships in the space so that this becomes the norm and not just a program.
Lori, do you want to share?
Absolutely. So I think that's something I started with, talking about risk and perceived risk is what's so important with this phase one. I don't like to call it a pilot because I really believe this is the first of many funds where we really knock things out of the park on saying, hey, we've got a lot of things in our underwriting criteria that really are not risk to the investor. Let's get those off the table if they're impediments to new individuals coming into the market. Because as Susan shared very eloquently, we have a huge affordable housing crisis, and we know all of that. We need every single player out there working to build more affordable housing. So let's make certain we clearly understand real risk as opposed to perceived risk. I'm anticipating that as NHT moves into a multi-investor fund platform, that there will be a component of every one of our multi-investor funds that will be focused on racial equity and bringing in and building up new developers. So I think all of us as syndicators, as investors, as developers should challenge ourselves on how to make what we do more inclusive, risk adverse for the investor, but not to the extent that we leave people out. And that we bring new and young faces to the table every day to address this crisis.
That's awesome. So that was all the questions that I had for the panelists. Millie, I know that you have a solid list of healthy questions for these panelists, so I will pivot back over to you for you to take lead here.
Millie, I just saw a fantastic question that came in from Jennifer. She asked, she heard about this program from a friend, but how is the word getting out there to other African-American women developers? Like, how do people find out about this?
I actually can take that question if Lori and Latoya don't mind. So currently, at least on LIF's side, all of the capital has been allocated. So right now, we're not able to bring in any new developers, but previous to allocating all of our capital, we've really relied on opportunities like these sort of panels and also really relying on industry trades to help us really share and amplify this program and initiative that we launched this last year. And I think going forward, we're really going to continue to rely on organizations like this that have a special focus on women or other people of color to help us really amplify and get the word out when we're ready for the next iteration of BDCI.
If I may just quickly jump in here, LIF is one of the largest and strongest CDFIs nationwide, but there are more than 1,300 certified community development financial institutions nationally and in all 50 states. And again, these are organizations that by definition provide loans and financial education and flexibility in underwriting and flexibility in structuring, and have a mission of serving low-income and underserved communities. So I would urge those to look up CDFIs that are in your community. There's a list on the U.S. Treasury's website. There's a list on bankамerica.com/CDFI, and specifically towards women entrepreneurs, women-led, housing developers. Bank of America last year launched an access to capital directory for women entrepreneurs, providing suggestions and resources on debt and equity and grant support for women entrepreneurs. So there are a lot of resources out there. LIF is a pioneer in many ways, but there are other organizations that are similarly working in underserved communities.
And I would just share here, NAHT has not deployed all of its capital. So reach out to me. I'll put you in contact with the individual, Brian Robinson, who's really leading this effort for NAHT. Reach out to Anna. Together we'll work on the LIHTC deployment side. We'll run out of those funds quickly. Our next iteration will be coming. We're working on raising capital at both LIF and NAHT. LIF more so right now since they're already out. We were very pleased at how quickly those funds got deployed and realized there was a real need. So please feel free to reach out to LIF and reach out to Carolyn or LaToya. I'm going to put my email address in the chat, but reach out to us. If we're out of money, we'll put you on the list for the next round of funds or help you find someone who can.
Thanks, Laura. I was actually going to ask, is this a revolving? So as funding coming back in and you're trying to cycle it over the next couple of years, or I might have missed that, but.
So the LIHTC fund will be 15 years, obviously, and the idea will be to deploy 75 million of capital and to go from there. The LIF fund is, LaToya, do you want to speak specifically to the revolving nature of the LIF fund?
Sure. So each loan is for up to 5 years for the line of credit. The borrower has the opportunity to draw on it for the first 3 years. And anything that's drawn in month 36 can then, any project loan can remain outstanding for an additional 2 years. So the way it's structured, you would get approved for a certain amount of capital, let's say it's $2 million, and then you would come to us with each project, and each project is up to $1 million in pre-development unsecured capital. You would draw down on that line, utilize it for pre-development expenses, and then repay us once that project goes into construction. Once repaid, then that money can be revolved. So we don't expect to have any unavailable capital from that initial 20 million for at least another 4.5 years. It's up to us now to be able to raise more capital and to be able to deploy more.
Thank you. I think that was really helpful. So I have a question here. How do you all envision measuring the success of this fund and asset class? And is this something you expect to be scaled across the syndication platforms, the country, to leverage more capital to support more developers of diverse backgrounds, i.e. or women? I know Lori kind of spoke to this a little bit with the multi-investment fund idea there. Does anyone else want to chime in?
Well, one of the things please go ahead.
Lori. Lori.
So I was just going to say, one of the things we are doing at both LIF and NAHT with our investor partners is obviously working to track outcomes, track that these projects perform at the levels that they have been promised in their closing. And so we will be providing ongoing support to those organizations, as well as reporting back to investors on the outcomes of that. those efforts. So right now, the specific outcomes are really performance-based of the project and delivering the developers delivering the projected returns as expected. And then it'll be up to LIF and NHT and the developers that are a part of that to get that word out to investors that these were safe, sound, and really quality investments.
I had another interesting.
And additionally, on the LIF side, we have created impact measurements where, as I mentioned, we don't underwrite the financial capacity of the organization, but we just track it because one of the objectives is to grow the business. So we looked at them at inception and we want to see kind of where they're trending to see if that measures out. Another outcome of this is LIF created a new position that is Director of Equity and Diversity, look at additional program products that may be needed. So add that we are a national organization. We're based in California. Therefore, we represent a lot of different ethnicities and a lot of different populations. So we do expect there to be additional programming. It's just, capacity right now. We know we're all busy and a lot of different initiatives, but we expect to grow our offerings in the near future.
Millie, I had one other interesting question come in. Carmen asked, is there a minimum project size to be considered for this program?
So on the LIHTC side, we have the first project we closed was around $12 million. The next project we're closing is just around $5 million. So there's not a minimum size. I think, most syndicators would share and most investors that when you drop below about 5 million of equity, it becomes much harder to just get the deal done. And so we like to see deals at least at 5 million. That lately hasn't been a problem for those of you developing. It seems like with increased development costs, I have not, in the last year, I've seen more deals over 20 million than I've seen, I think, in my total career put together.
I think that
and LIF,
in this Genesis, please go ahead, Latoya.
That's why we don't have minimums on our product, but our product does have a liquidity maximum because we wanted to make sure that we were getting those organizations and those companies that were not on the merger scale first, will be able to access other sources of capital.
And from Bank of America's perspective, I mean, this is one of the reasons that we want to work with CDFIs like LIF is we don't design the terms, we don't design the product. We support the organization and then get out of the way because LIF is closer to the needs of the market. And what we're trying to do here is bend the market to meet the needs of LIF's borrowers and intentionally go deeper with lower minimums, as Latoya mentioned, and more flexibility in how projects are underwritten to get smaller projects and to get smaller developers, off the ground so that larger and bigger projects can eventually be developed, but to support the smaller needs so that all have access to capital on affordable terms.
Susan, since you're talking, I had kind of a question. Bank of America has a huge DE&I commitment. What are other things that you are doing in the space? And I'll pitch that to everyone, but if you want to answer to that.
Sure. When we launched the Racial Equity Initiative, that I mentioned back in 2020 and expanded it in 2021, the pillars were jobs, small business development, and access to capital, and healthcare. I mean, we really saw kind of nationwide that the disparities in economic disparities and health disparities just necessitated action. And we're trying to bring new tools and new investments to the table. This is an example of this. We've provided 10-year money, below market interest rates and with no strings attached. LIF will repay the loan, but that's all of the negotiation between us and LIF is trying to get capital structured differently because the way capital has been structured hasn't worked. We are investing equity in private equity firms that are targeting BIPOC small businesses. providing access to capital where it hasn't flowed before. We're investing in minority deposit institutions. We're providing unsolicited, we're calling MDI saying, would you like an equity investment from Bank of America? Unsolicited equity investments to try and build the capacity of all types of developers, financial institutions, and healthcare providers to try and get at some of the disparities, to slowly chip away on what has persisted for too long.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to talk about any other DE&I initiatives at their organizations?
So NAHT has worked really hard in partnership with LIF and with SAFE on trying to think through and be very outward facing on a commitment to do something, to really do something and make certain this is a movement and not a moment. And I think that's very important. NAHT, SAFE, and many of the SAFE members have collaboratively entered into a racial equity pledge that you will start to see on each of those organizations' websites. There is a true commitment in particularly the area of finance and development to try to bring in more persons of color and to make certain that we're developing that. SAFE has a network now for individuals in any of its organizations, sister organizations that are persons of color that want to participate in an ongoing work network. And we're just trying to be very thoughtful of what we're saying and looking at specifically credit committee issues and helping our investors work through that, because that, not the DEI issues, but issues that tend to speak to issues of DEI are very difficult for investors to deal with at their committee. So we're trying to be a good support and partner on them on those issues.
And Laura, you're speaking of risk committees, it reminded me, so much of affordable housing finance is project-based. Okay, what's the appraised value? What does the pro forma look like? What's the development budget? But if what LaToya was talking about is through this initiative, LIF is investing in the developers and, improving the developer kind of human and financial capacity in and of itself. So it's not just project finance, it's enterprise level finance to try and build the businesses and the developers to then scale up and do more, which I think, that's another innovation that we haven't seen before, because so much of, housing finance is looking at, the bricks and the mortar and the dirt. So it's really nice to see that innovation, and hopeful that it will spark others to do similarly, where we focus on the enterprise, the developer, and then what they need to grow.
That's great. Raven, if you're available, we were kind of wondering what's next with your team? What's your next project on the horizon? Do you care to share, what you're working on?
Sure. So the reason why I'm in Alabama today, I just submitted a tax credit application to the Alabama Housing Finance Authority. That is for a 143 unit senior independent living apartment community. We also have our I have another Astoria at Crystal Lake, which is also another 165 unit independent senior living property that we're going to be constructing there as well, which is where we're deploying our funds from the BDCI to the Astoria at Crystal Lake, as well as Southtown. And then we've also expanded our building footprint into other states where we're going into the Virgin Islands. So we'll be working, constructing affordable housing properties over there, as well as in North Carolina and Florida. So, we're driving that train.
And if you're hiring for the Virgin Islands, let me know.
Or those site visits.
I do believe that we are hiring for that. I don't know if he's posted it locally just for that area. I'll get back to you on that if you let me.
Let us know, because the Women's Affordable Housing Network, we are, trying to share out those kind of opportunities as well to our members.
We did post 3 positions from the Benoit Group. One was for VP of Real Estate Development. Another one was for the Development Manager, Development Coordinator. And I have been working through my alumni school, Georgia Tech, with getting some interns in as well.
That is awesome. So I actually work for a CDFI here in Ohio. And so this is so interesting to hear. And, you know, all these things are kind of mulling through my head as we work on upcoming grant applications. So it's awesome and so inspiring to see this amazing group of ladies come together to make this happen. And I know that that's a lot of work and coordination. I would open it up if there's any last questions in our Q&A or final comments. And if not, I would pitch it over to our president for just a quick wrap up then. Going once, going twice. Well, I would like to pitch this over to Ashley Northcutt, our president.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for sharing all the information you did with us and your time. Millie said it best when she said at the beginning, she got chills when we reached out to Lori to hear more about this initiative. So I did hear on the panel that you're looking to people like Women's Affordable Housing Network to share this kind of initiative. Please feel free to reach out anytime. We will scream it from the mountaintops. Not one of us is shy. We are so proud of what you're doing, and just sitting here watching all the powerful women on this call is so moving. I think it takes women involved to get things done, period. So this is very, very exciting, and we're here to support you all the way. And Raven, good luck with your new projects. We can't wait to see them come off the ground.
I guess with that, we will give you guys back the 3 minutes of your day, and we hope to see you at future events. Please do follow us on social media. Make sure you're registered as a member, sign up for the newsletter, all those great things, because we have all those exciting things coming up in 2022, and we're looking forward to seeing you all. So again, thank you, and have a wonderful day. Wonderful day. I sorry.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank